Greetings. I wanted to discuss today the ancestral transfer of trauma first, and in a similar vein, past life. Right now I'm sitting in a room that I consider my ancestors' shrine. There are many photos around. These are my grandparents on the wall. And when I come to this place to reside for a time, I know that I'm here to work through ancestral trauma transfer. So, what is that exactly? So, when a person has a trauma or a deep emotional experience that is not coped with at the time, that is just suppressed, that is not fully allowed to be felt, that they don't know what to do with, that sometimes is too shocking to really process at the time, and it is stored then in the body, and this usually manifests then as a specific ailment, either in their lifetime or in another lifetime. So if it's trapped in the cells, if it's trapped in the memory, it becomes part of the DNA. So it becomes part of the blueprint or pattern of that person's consciousness and read out how that person continues to perpetuate. Now, sometimes things that are unprocessed don't show up in that person's lifetime. They actually show up in their children or in their children's children. And each time it is passed along, it's actually deepening the imprint, right? It's solidifying that pattern more deeply. So when it gets to you, when it gets to me, when it gets to this line, and depending on how long this is going on in our ancestry, sometimes it can be just a generation or two, and sometimes it can be many, many, many. I do emotion code work when necessary to track down these sort of ancestral traumas and find out how many. And sometimes for people, these traumas are going back 15 generations. And that's a long time for something. And when it's that far back, it's actually such a deep thing. It's very unconscious, but it still can be playing out and manifesting in your life either as a physical disorder or as just a pattern or a feeling, a heaviness, a sadness, where you don't really know where it came from. So with that in mind, even knowing that this exists, this is step one in clearing the ancestral transfer. So when we can become aware of the fact that these things are passed on, even if we don't have access to emotion code, which actually you can get online. I'm pretty sure he has the whole book free online, but it requires you to muscle test. So you've got to have an element of trust in yourself to muscle test yourself to find out how many generations back, or you can, get a hold of me and we can do that. But even if you don't go into the specifics of that, and my job is to empower you more than do it for you. So even if we don't go back and find exactly how many, even just knowing, I like to imagine there's little threads that extend from us that are going into our ancestry, before we do the clearing, the integration. And if you can just tune into yourself and feel, what are your biggest difficulties right now? What are you struggling with the most? And I'm sure if you're struggling with something, you've tried all kinds of different things to get at it. And if you're still not successful after you've tried all the things, all the possibilities that you have been able to access to this point, what if you just decide that that thing is an ancestral transfer? So if it's a money thing you just can't seem to get over, this poverty thing, it could be an ancestral transfer. Okay, you can't seem to get the relationship right. There's something, in relationships it's tricky because ancestral transfer is a transfer of belief, right? A belief of what a good relationship or successful relationship looks like. Though your soul may be coming from a very different line, a very different purpose for manifesting an evolved relationship that's never existed on the planet before, so it can be very discordant to have that ancestral transfer of relationship pattern up against your soul mission trying to work out. So it's like, no wonder things don't work out. So to untangle that, just become aware, oh, I'm carrying an ancestral transfer. This isn't even mine. Okay, so that's the first step. And then you're going to turn to that transfer and thank it, honor it for showing up, showing itself to you so that it can be now integrated, because it's really less about clearing it and it's just about collapsing it, because we're empowering the person in the here and now, yourself in the here and now. When I empower myself in the here and now, I recognize I contain all of that ancestral memory, that it contains wisdoms and it contains traumas. And even if there's a trauma transfer and I look at it and I know what it is, I can put it in its correct place in my consciousness as now something that's supportive to my evolution. I know there was wisdoms contained in it, and I also know there was like suppressed energy, which is power. Because if that energy had been released, there would have been power, there would have been a clearing, there would have been a release. So instead, you're getting transferred, yes, the trauma for a moment, but as soon as you look at it, it's no longer the trauma. As soon as you look at it, now you're conscious of it, and you're like, oh, got it, great grandma, you passed along your, feelings of the depression, not having enough money. I got it. Okay, I know now that that created strength in you, that created a resilience in you that I also got. So I'm going to accept that with that, I got resilience, I got strength, I got an ability to be frugal and crafty or whatever it is. And I'm going to thank your experience, and I'm going to own that that's part of me. But when I do that, it allows the discordant resonance that's built into that poverty consciousness to just kind of like collapse into your field. And the empowerment, the owning of it, the loving of it, the opening of our hearts to it helps to neutralize that discordant wave. And we bring honor and gratitude, praise, love to it as an amazing accomplishment of our ancestry. And then our heart grows and we have that wisdom nugget. And instead of undermining us, that thread instead becomes a creative pattern, a wisdom, and we change the neural pathways just by looking at it differently. So when we take consciousness to any of these things, that consciousness, that observer mind is what changes something. It transforms something. It's like magic. Because instead of working from unconscious or subconscious terrain, you're now not just working from conscious mind, you're working from superconscious mind, from the observer faculty, the higher mind, the conscious self. And you're not just like in conscious mind going, oh yeah, there's ancestral trauma, but I don't know anything to do about it. That's just conscious mind, and that's disempowered mind. But in super consciousness, we're looking at it from my consciousness changes the thing. I look at something in my being and that changes it by looking at it. So the same is true. It could be a past life transfer. You could be carrying this pattern from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. And though past and future are sort of illusory, it can also be looked at as parallel timelines. So in many other timelines, maybe you've chosen the trauma version or the unconscious replaying of something, right? Or the subconscious patterning, or even the conscious trying to get over it but not really feeling like you can. And there's a little switch between conscious mind and superconscious mind. And that consciousness can be expanded, enhanced through yoga, meditation, yoga nidra, martial arts practices, different meditations where you go from realizing you have just smaller conscious mind to superconsciousness, an ability to observe from a higher mind, higher perspective, an empowered position in your life, and you are in charge. You are queening and kinging it. You are in charge of how to look at that so as to switch it. So if it's a past life trauma transfer, say you've taken vows of poverty in other timelines, thinking that would be a way for you to access spirituality, because that's usually why we take vows of poverty. We're wanting to access deeper parts of self. Then we can go, great. And I can also access deeper parts of self in riches. That's my new goal, is to be able to take my spirituality into riches and not buy into the story that says money corrupts people. That's a different timeline, a different story. That's a transfer as well. And we get to override that in super consciousness by deciding what the empowered story is and telling that story and believing that story and making that story a reality. So around money, our conscious mind can say, wonderful, I honor all of the vows of poverty, all of the transfers of the trying to become spiritual through lack of money. Because we've had to do that before. We can do the flip side sometimes. One person, people start on either polarity and then they learn the other side too. So if that's been your trip, then you're also going to learn how to be spiritual with lots of money, how to infuse your riches with consciousness. And that is the trip you're on, and that's the journey. So every time money comes to you, love, praise, and gratitude, knowing you're getting a chance to deepen your spiritual purpose and assist more people, right? So it's our consciousness that transforms these trauma transfers. It's how, and usually when we need a coach to help us with that is when we can't access that empowered story. We don't know what it is. We don't trust ourselves to create it. And a coach, like myself, I have all kinds of empowered stories around all these things. I can think of any, we can flip it in any moment, these stories. So if you need assistance with that, please reach out. Leave me a comment. You can send me a message, stajabliss@gmail.com. And I hope this has been helpful. So any questions, please leave those, and I'll be happy to go deeper into this in another video if that is necessary. But for now, let's change those stories and upgrade our reality so that we can experience pure, authentic self, creative self. More next time.